All right, we're up on YouTube. That's looking good. And thank you all for joining me tonight. This is the first webinar that I've had in, I don't know, a few months. And so I'm excited that I am planning to do a webinar every other month. And I will also have release some recipe videos on the other month. So this is January, we've got a webinar. And then in February, I will release some recipe videos, and they're going to be really fun because I'm doing them in collaboration with Angela Dennison, who's a dietitian at Wellness House in Chicago. They're another cancer support agency. So she's a better fancy chef than me. I'm just a regular cook. So anyway, those should be fun. And if you are on our email list, either for Cancer Dietitian or for Cancer Services, you will get those emails automatically. Okay, so today's topic is fighting cancer with your fork. This is actually a presentation that I've given several times, kind of updated it over and over, but I have not done it for the Cancer Dietitian audience in quite a while. So I thought we could kick off the new year with this particular topic. And I thought I should introduce myself too, because some of you might not be familiar with me. I am a registered dietitian, a board certified specialist in oncology nutrition, and a licensed dietitian nutritionist. I also have a master's in public health, and I recently completed an executive certificate in nonprofit management. So I work for a nonprofit agency, Cancer Services. We're actually a local cancer support agency in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but I have followers of the Cancer Dietitian from all over. So actually, because of the pandemic, many of our Cancer Dietitian followers have been able to join with some of our virtual programs at Cancer Services, which has been really great. And probably the way you registered for this webinar was on our Cancer Services website. So you're welcome to join with any of our virtual programs that we offer at Cancer Services as well. I have recently started doing a special topic once a month, and that topic also has the opportunity to have a discussion group with it. So we'll be doing that in January. So if you're interested in any of those, you can always shoot me an email for any questions or go to the registration page where you registered for this. All right, so let's get started, kind of jump right into our topic. Here's what we're going to review and cover today. First of all, we'll talk about evidence-based recommendations regarding nutrition for cancer risk reduction and survivorship. We will talk about specific foods that have been studied for cancer risk reduction, and then kind of broaden out a little bit from those specific foods and talk about your overall food intake pattern, which is just kind of, I mean, I would refer to it as your diet, but a lot of people hear diet and they think, oh, I'm supposed to go on a diet. That's not the kind of diet I'm talking about. For me, your diet is just what you typically eat. So we'll talk about what you typically eat and how that influences your risk as well. So I think particularly for this audience, it's important to know that there is a recommendation from the American Institute for Cancer Research that after diagnosis with cancer, you should follow the recommendations for risk reduction if you can. Now, there is that caveat of if you can, because we all know that during treatment, it can make it really difficult to follow some of these, healthy eating guidelines. And so we always say during treatment, or I often call it a season of treatment, or there's different seasons in your life where you may not feel well enough to eat kind of the quote healthiest diet. But we would recommend that you do the best that you can. So I actually just had an email from somebody who said they couldn't make it because of some of their side effects tonight. And I've got other tips on my website that can assist with some of your side effect management if you would need that. But this tonight is really kind of focusing on the current healthy living recommendations. I got a little scratch in my throat. Okay. So the reason is that recommendations for cancer risk reduction aren't just useful for people who have never faced a cancer diagnosis, but they can be a blueprint for preventing cancer from recurring. And then for cancer survivors, either newly diagnosed or post-treatment, adopting these cancer recommendations can improve the quality of your everyday life, possibly help reduce risk of recurrence. There's data suggesting that. It's not super strong, but we know that healthy eating is good for you overall. My slides don't want to cooperate. Okay. Make sure that's the next one. Yes. So the current also recommendation around supplements is to not use supplements to protect against cancer. And as I say it, your body prefers nutrients in food form, not pill form. So that's sort of this overall reminder that to get the best benefit out of your nutrition plan, you focus on the foods that you eat and not necessarily taking nutrients in supplement form. Why is that? To reduce your risk of cancer or live healthy after a diagnosis, you want to focus on a diet with a variety of foods. We'll talk about that overall eating pattern rather than taking pills, powders, juices, or extracts for nutrients. So as I mentioned before, the AICR does put out these evidence-based recommendations around cancer, and the AICR is the American Institute for Cancer Research. So they're one of my favorite organizations to get information from. Their website is aicr.org, and they have these recommendations on there. They have a lot of great recipes as well. And if you're a research reader, they have a lot of data on that. So I do like to key in on some of their more positively framed recommendations. So what do you need to focus on? And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today, is how different foods fit into these particular recommendations. Specifically, to eat more of a variety of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes, such as beans. They also do have some limit recommendations, which is limit energy-dense foods, limit red meat, limit alcohol, and foods processed with salt. And then avoid, which is a strong word. I will say I'm not a fan of the word avoid, because I think you can fit anything in moderation. But in terms of the evidence-based recommendations, avoid sugary drinks and processed meats. And then just in comparison, the American Cancer Society guidelines on nutrition and physical activity for cancer prevention is to eat a healthy diet with an emphasis on plant foods. All right, so when it comes to my approach to nutrition, I prefer to kind of come at it from a positive mindset, or kind of a popular way of thinking about it right now is an asset-based mindset. So what are the strengths that we can bring to the table? And the foods you choose are sort of the strengths that you can bring to your body. It's an opportunity to promote your health. It doesn't mean that you have to choose these healthy foods all the time. I can't remember if this one at the end, I don't want to spoil my my take-home points, but I often refer to 80% of the time might be a good goal, that you choose foods that promote your health 80% of the time, and that allows you 20% of the time to choose the foods that basically just taste good and feel good to you. So the key to why we promote a plant-focused diet and eating lots of plant foods is that evidence continues to show that minerals, vitamins, and phytochemicals found in plant foods interact to provide extra cancer protection. So these are called phytochemicals. It just means plant chemicals. Or if you don't like the word chemical, you can call them phytonutrients. And there's over 1,000 discovered so far, lots of different categories, and we will cover several of these categories tonight as we're talking about different foods that fit into those categories. All right, so remember that phyto means plant, and these are plant nutrients that help our bodies function. They have lots of different ways that they do that. They can stimulate your immune system, kind of in a good way, not overstimulating it, but stimulating it. Block substances we eat, drink, and breathe from becoming carcinogens, reduce inflammation, prevent DNA damage, help with DNA repair, reduce the kind of oxidative damage to cells that spark cancer, slow the growth rate of cancer cells, and then trigger damaged cells to commit suicide before they can reproduce. Also can help regulate hormones. Okie dokie. Well, okay. So these are some of the foods that are on the most researched list when it comes to nutrition and cancer. And we'll talk about several of these as we go through tonight. But the way I have my topic organized is really about the phytochemical and what nutrients or foods contain those particular phytochemicals. So we will cover each of these, but this is just a quick list because I know people like lists. Now, you do not have to eat everything on this list. If there's something on the list that you don't like, that's okay. And when I talk about the different phytochemicals, you see that there's several different foods that can provide those phytochemicals to you. So you can choose based on your taste buds or what's available to you, how you might give your body those phytochemicals. All right, so our first category is carotenoids, which you've probably heard of. Beta carotene is one of those. Lycopene and lutein you might have heard of in terms of prostate cancer. They're specifically found in tomatoes. That's how tomatoes are on this list. And zeaxanthin, I can't guarantee I am saying these words correctly, so you'll have to just let that part go. They're very horticulture or biology, botany terms. So all of these are different types of phytochemicals in the carotenoid family. The foods that have these particular phytochemicals: broccoli, carrots, dark green leafy vegetables, tomatoes, winter squash, and sweet potatoes. So you can see there's a pretty wide variety. And generally, they're dark green or orange. So a lot of people know beta carotene is found in orange foods. The next phytochemical group is called flavonoids. So anthocyanins and quercetin are both types of flavonoids, and you can find those in a variety of things: apples, citrus fruits, onions, soy, coffee, tea. And what I tell people too is that a lot of nutrients are found in the skins. So if you can eat the apple skins, you tend to get more phytochemicals, and they're different. So what you find in the flesh of the apple is different than the nutrients that are in the skin. They're both good. It's not that one's better than the other. So eating the whole fruit or vegetable, if you can, is helpful. Same thing with citrus fruits. Now, I don't expect you to eat all the skins of the citrus fruit, but anytime you can zest the skin or put a little bit of that skin in your smoothie. It helps to boost the nutrient content of the foods you're eating. I like to highlight onions here too, because I think we often hear, oh, white foods are bad for you, but there's a huge category of white foods that are actually good for you. So onions, garlic, all different types of white foods. Bananas technically are white. So they do still have great nutrient benefits for you. Even potatoes, even white potatoes. All right, the next phytochemical category is indoles, glucosinolates, and isothiocyanates. And I will say the isothiocyanates probably have the most research behind them when it comes to reducing risk of cancer and helping our bodies to naturally recognize an unhealthy cell. And that is typically, when we talk about those, we talk about cruciferous vegetables. So you'll see here, these are all cruciferous vegetables: broccoli, cabbage, collard greens, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. And I will point out that in our February recipe videos, I'm going to do roasted cabbage, so you can kind of learn an easy way for that. I have the most enormous cabbage in my fridge right now, so I'm going to use that for this recipe video. But these are all great ways to have this particular type of phytochemical. So if you don't like broccoli or you don't like Brussels sprouts, but you like kale and cabbage, you can get those nutrients that way. You don't have to love broccoli. Inositol is the next on our list, and typically found in the bran from a lot of whole grains. So corn, oats, rye, and wheat. In the bran, you can find the inositol. So this is why we would highly recommend, as much as possible, to eat whole grain as opposed to processed grains. So examples of a processed grain would be most grits are processed. So I live in the South and people will have grits, which is corn based. Grits are typically processed, so they would not have the bran from the corn in them. However, if you like polenta, which is the whole grain version, that would give you the bran. Same thing with wheat. We would recommend whole wheat bread if at all possible. And then other foods that have inositol, nuts, and soy. So speaking of isoflavones, diadzine and genistein, they're typically found in soybeans or soy products. So edamame is what you see in the picture here. It's the whole soybean that you typically pop right out of that shell. I love to cook them at home. They're really easy if you buy them frozen in or out of the shell. Heats up really fast, either in the microwave or some boiling water. So we really like soybeans. They're simple. You just add a little salt and eat them right as they are. Tofu is a little more processed version of soy, but still nutritious for you. And then soy milk is a good alternative if you prefer a plant-based milk, but you still want the same amount of protein that you would find in cow's milk. Soy milk actually has a full 8 grams of protein per cup because soybeans are great sources of protein. So all of these are great ways to get not just protein and fiber into your diet, but also these phytochemicals that are really good for you. Ellagic acid and resveratrol are both types of polyphenols or examples of polyphenols. And the foods that you can find them in typically, so green tea is one that's really high compared to other teas. So that's why it gets this sort of health highlight. But other teas, black tea is also comes from a plant. You brew that plant into the water and you get those plant nutrients. So resveratrol is typically found in the skin of the red grape. This is where in the past there had been some research suggesting that maybe red wine was good for you, has a health benefit. Now the Heart Association has actually removed that recommendation around red wine, but it turns out you can get resveratrol in the skin of the red grapes by either eating grapes themselves and eat the skin, or grape juice can also give you a little bit of that as well. So it has wine here on the list, although you probably noticed on my, overview slide in the beginning, alcohol is not something that we recommend, especially around cancer risk reduction. So that's another one of those, I don't know, I call it a choose your own adventure, but something you may want to moderate more. Berries are great sources, citrus fruits. And it's kind of fun when you see citrus fruits on this list and you saw them on another list we already talked about, how, foods are a combination of lots of different nutrients. They're not just one. Or, orange is not just vitamin C. It has so many different things in it that are good for you. And this is why food form of nutrient is so much better than just a pill form, because you get that wide variety of nutrients in all the foods that you're eating, and your body uses those in the level that is naturally in the food, rather than supplement form, which tends to be really high amounts of one nutrient, which isn't really what our body prefers. So supplements are useful if you have a deficiency, and that's when we would want you to use a high dose of something, is when your blood levels are really low. All right, another phytochemical, terpenes, that's the group for parallel alcohol, limonene, carnosol. Limonene, you can probably guess, comes from citrus fruits, specifically lemons. And you can find these also in cherries and rosemary. So citrus fruit peel, when you think about the different function of phytochemicals, they have a role in the foods that we eat. So when citrus fruits are grown, that phytochemical helps to protect the skin of the fruit from burning. So when we eat those foods, that phytochemical can also help our bodies function in terms of reducing risk of skin cancer. So that kind of ends my little portion on individual foods or the phytochemicals that are represented in individual foods. But I do want to talk about what I call a food intake pattern. So when I sit down with a client, I like to see, what do you typically eat? So just a one day, example doesn't really show me what is typical over a week's time. I usually like people to give me between 3 and 5 days worth of a food record so I can kind of put a picture together around the pattern. So what we know is that a diet with a focus on plant foods such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and legumes, which are beans. So I need to fix that on the slide. Beans, nuts, and seeds is what I meant to put. That's what is recommended by all different types of health organizations. Heart health, cancer risk reduction, bone health. We're all, the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, all recommending a plant-based diet. That does not mean that you have to eliminate meat. A plant-based diet can include animal foods, such as low-fat dairy, fish, small amounts of animal meats, if they're in the right proportion. So when we talk about your food intake pattern, we want most of your foods to be plants so that you build up that phytochemical meter as much as you can. Where do you find phytochemicals? You don't have to memorize that whole list of foods I showed you. It is not necessary for you to memorize that list. But I always say there's a more simple way you can do it, and you've heard it before from other people, and it's called, eat the rainbow. So the color does matter in your foods. I'm not talking about Skittles or fake colors, but the colors that you find naturally in the foods that grow in the ground can tell you a little bit about their phytochemical profile. So by eating a variety of colors, you get a variety of nutrients. So right now I am running the Eat the Rainbow program, which is a 12-week program to increase fruit and vegetable and to really kind of pay attention to the variety of fruits and vegetables that you eat. And it's based on this, choosing different colors of foods, because that will help you get a variety. Their phytochemicals, again, are found in food, not pills. And basically, the more plant nutrients you can get, the better. So going back to the animal products piece of this, it's not that eating meat is necessarily bad for you, but people who eat meat tend to also eat fewer plants. So if you can strike the right balance where you can still get enough plants in your diet, but kind of flavor them or have some of your favorite foods that are animal products mixed into a mostly plant-based diet, that's fine. Or if you want to be a vegetarian or a vegan, that's also fine. Vegetarians and vegans, as long as you're not the cheese pizza kind of vegetarian, where all you eat is cheese and crackers or bread, you're probably getting lots of plants, and that is nutritious. So somebody asked if you'll get this information so you can print it out. Yes, so after this recording is done, actually probably tomorrow, I will post the video and the slides on my website, and I'll send those out by email too. So if you want to print the slide set, you can, or just pick some of them. Somebody also asked, could you comment on the paleo diet and keto diet for health? Very good questions. So again, I'm not a big fan of any particular diet, although I do suggest eating lots of plants. So some people would call that a plant-based diet or a plant-forward diet. I'm not a fan of keto because they basically don't let you eat fruits. They don't let you eat whole grains. Probably you can't eat beans either. So I really prefer that you have a wide variety of foods to choose from. I think all of those foods are really nutritious. And a lot of people who follow a keto diet, first of all, they get constipated because they're not eating enough fiber. And second of all, they tend to eat a little too much of the meat and fats, especially saturated fats, than that we're most comfortable with. So from a health standpoint, keto's not my favorite. Well, I don't like it at all. I would never recommend it to somebody. If you are currently following a keto diet, you're eating a lot of non-starchy vegetables, and you feel well and you're doing well and all your labs look good and you like doing it. I take from my college Frisbee coach who said, never change a winning game. So if the keto diet is a winning game for you right now, I wouldn't necessarily change it. But if you don't follow that particular diet, I don't recommend it. And it's basically the same for paleo, kind of the same same situation. Okay, so this is how I tend to think about it. And if I'm in a real live class, I have a whiteboard and I like to draw this thermometer on the whiteboard for you. And we do a little comparison. And we compare the typical American phytochemical meter or thermometer with the cancer fighting phytochemical thermometer. So this is the typical American. In a class, I like to get your feedback, like what's typical, what do you think is typical? I'm not asking what you eat because most people that come to my seminars are not the typical American. They're health conscious and they tend to eat pretty, at least somewhat nutritiously. So this is what we're talking about, the typical person. Frosted Flakes or some kind of sugar cereal, coffee that's probably 4 pumps of syrup, you know, from Starbucks. Orange juice because they're too busy to eat an orange. It's too much work. Nabs, which is peanut butter crackers for those of you who aren't in the South. Cheeseburger for lunch with fries and a Coke, of course. Now you go to the vending machine in the afternoon when you really need kind of a pick-me-up, get a candy bar, and then maybe for dinner, maybe you cook for yourself. You have chicken, green beans, potatoes, salad. Now my classes are like, oh no, people don't cook their own chicken, they go the drive-through. We have Bojangles here in the South, and so they get, you know, their fried chicken and their potatoes there. For dinner or for dessert, they're having ice cream, of course, 4 scoops, because 1 scoop looks lonely in the bowl. So when you look at the phytochemical meter here, and every little tick mark on our thermometer is about a half a cup of fruits and vegetables, they're mainly getting this from their just their dinner, right? Maybe some people will say, oh, a slice of lettuce and tomato on the cheeseburger. Well, that doesn't really add up that much. So this is the typical American. Actually, it's more generous than the typical American. I think when we do surveys, we find most people are consuming between 1/2 and 1 cup of fruits and vegetables a day. All right, so let's, compare that to what maybe many of you eat. Oatmeal with fruit and cinnamon, because spices are another great way to add plant nutrients into your day. A green smoothie, which might have some leafy greens in it, green tea, yogurt and fruit for a snack in the morning. Maybe you have a sandwich with hummus and vegetables, or even simpler, could just be peanut butter and banana. Minestrone soup, so there's some beans and vegetables in your soup. Fruit. Maybe you go to the vending machine and you pick up a trail mix instead of the candy bar. So then that's the difference between a Snickers and a trail mix, right? Snickers bar has a couple of peanuts. Trail mix actually has a significant number of nuts. For dinner, maybe you have veggie pizza with kale salad, which I have a delicious kale salad recipe if you need that. And then for dessert, we could do chocolate avocado pudding. I know to some of you that might sound weird, and it did sound weird to me when I first heard it too. So did green smoothies. And then when something sounds weird, of course, I go home and try it. Oh, it turns out it's really good. So if you need a chocolate avocado pudding recipe, that's also on my website. But as you look through this day, you notice every single choice that we made somehow includes plant foods or fruits and vegetables in it. That helps us add up our phytonutrient meter so that you have more like, this is 4.5 cups of fruits and vegetables in the day. You could even just swap out some of the meals, and that would help build your phytochemical meter higher. So what I tell people is, I don't think that the problem with the typical American diet is that they eat too much junk food. I mean, maybe they do, but I think the bigger problem is what they're missing. And what they're missing is all of these phytonutrients that they could get if they just made a few different choices with some of their meals. So these are what I consider kind of the baseline things that you would want to include in your day to make sure that you're getting enough phytonutrients. So plant-based diet daily goals, that's what, when I looked across all, like the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, the anti-inflammatory diet, the My Plate, the American Institute for Cancer Research, they have a New American Plate. When I looked at them all, I found, okay, what do they all have in common? And let's just build off of that so that you can kind of tailor your own. So instead of having to go to some keto book that's very restrictive and not fun and not necessarily delicious, let's figure out how to build something that works for you with some of the foods that you really like. So number one, most important thing you can do is to include 4 to 5 cups of fruits and vegetables every day. So this is 1 cup of fruit with breakfast, 1 cup of vegetables with lunch, 1 cup of vegetables with dinner, and then have fruit or vegetables with your snacks during the day. That will add up. What doesn't work is if you don't have any fruits or vegetables until it's dinner time, and then you try to cram in 4 to 5 cups. That's not going to work. Second thing to focus on is getting protein, spreading it throughout the day. It does not take a lot to meet your needs. If you're eating meat, a small portion is adequate. But then even if you are a meat eater, we do recommend that you choose beans, nuts, or seeds as a protein at least 1 meal a day. And I think that's something that some people miss. Now, I tend to pack my lunches ahead of time. And today I had hummus in my lunch and I had nuts. So I had a little bit of both beans and nuts. So somebody asked, where does dairy fit in? I count dairy as a protein, basically. So it would be an animal-based protein. And then someone else asked my opinion about organic versus not organic. That is not as important as whether you actually eat fruits and vegetables. So I have a whole webinar that I've done on organic and not organic. And my bottom line is basically that there's not a lot of data, or there's not data showing that people who consume organic foods are healthier. The amount of pesticides that's used is very limited on the foods that you actually eat. So what's most important is that you eat fruits and vegetables, and whether you have them organic or not is not as important to me. That's kind of what you're most comfortable with. Okay, so other goals, 100% whole grains. Again, this is why keto is not my favorite. 2 to 3 cups per day. That will get you extra phytonutrients. Fluids, have your water bottle with you. Drink 64 ounces a day from water, unsweetened tea or coffee. Choose plain versions of foods and flavor them yourself at home. That was supposed to be on the next one. But the reason is, unsweetened tea or unsweetened coffee will give you phytonutrients from the tea or the coffee plant. Same thing with flavoring your foods with herbs and spices. That can help to add plant nutrients to your meals. And then if you're drinking water and unsweet tea or coffee, that helps to sort of cut down on the amount of sugar sweetened beverages you eat. So for those of you who prefer more of a picture or an infographic rather than a list of words, I think the plate is really basic, but also really helpful. So when it comes to the foods that you put on your plate, the ratio is important. On the left, you see the typical American, and you know that it's true because it's kind of funny, that most Americans, they cover half their plate in meat. They cover most of the rest of their plate in some kind of starchy food that's not usually whole grains. And they have this tiny little corner of vegetables with cheese sauce that's not real cheese. So when you think about their phytochemicals, they're only getting it in this little section here under the cheese sauce. And that is a problem. What we want to see is to have half your plate covered in fruits and or vegetables, a quarter of your plate in a starch that's preferably either a starchy vegetable or a whole grain. And then your protein is kind of where you choose your adventure. Do you want protein to be plants? Do you want it to be animals? And so dairy fits right here for me in this corner of protein. So it doesn't matter as much if you're filling the rest of your plate with plants, then what you choose for your protein is less impactful than if you're covering half your plate with that meat. So someone asked, would you consider nuts rich in fat? Yes, and they are healthy fats, so I think they're nutritious and good for you kind of food choices. They're also great sources of fiber. Another question, is too much soy bad for you? So there is some, rumors that have gone around in the past around soy, especially for hormone positive or hormone sensitive cancers. At this point, we think it's perfectly fine to eat soy in its whole form, so it's not something I'm concerned about. If somebody asked me, is too much bad for you? I guess I would say yes, but I feel like it would take a lot of soy for me to quantify it as too much. So unlikely that you're going to have too much. And soy would go on that protein corner too. I don't know if I mentioned that. That would be a plant-based protein that would help to build your phytochemical meter. So this is always my conclusion. Ooh, I'm really far ahead. This is my conclusion in most of my presentations, is to keep calm and eat your vegetables. And that's because I don't think that you have to have a degree in nutrition to know how to eat. I don't think that you have to know how to pronounce all those words or even know which foods have what phytochemicals in them. What matters is if you eat plenty of plants, a variety of colors of your plants, and you have plant proteins and your meat portions are not super huge most of the time, then you will get the nutrients that your body needs. But what we don't want is if you eat a lot of processed foods, you don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, then you're unlikely to basically meet your body's needs for phytochemicals. And those nutrients help our bodies function. If we don't eat them, there's nowhere else that it's going to come from. And we have data on supplement studies that don't show that getting your nutrients in supplement form is adequate. So really the only place you can get it is from food. Now, the nice thing is food is delicious for the most part. If you're in treatment, things aren't tasting right, you have GI issues going on, I would always tell you to just eat what you can while you can, and then wait till treatment's over and the side effects are gone. Then you can start keying in on this particular way of eating. So I've got a couple of next steps, and feel free to continue putting your questions in the Q&A or the chat. My next steps for this particular topic, first of all, if you want more information on each of those daily recommendations that I have, you can sign up for my Survivor Diet email series. So that's just cancerdietitian.com/survivor diet. You put your email in, and once a week, if you say you put it in right now, you'll get the first email. And then after that, every week, I will send you one of those daily habit recommendations and some information about how you could do that. Be sure you're on my email list so you can get the recipe videos that Angela and I are sending out in February. I also am planning a virtual Survivor cooking class on Tuesdays, noon Eastern time in March, and Angela and I will be doing that together, so you can sign up for that as well. And then my next webinar will actually be on proteins. So for people who were asking about plant proteins versus animal proteins, we're going to kind of dig more into how much protein do you need, what types should it be. Probably that webinar will be about as long as this one, because I can usually get through that information and get you what you need pretty quickly. But that is the plan for our next nutrition webinar. And of course, I always want you to enjoy your food as much as possible. I know in treatment, it can be really hard when things don't taste right. But hopefully, as you move out of active treatment, taste buds come back. All right, a couple more questions that came in. Can you talk about mushrooms and their benefits? So yes, mushrooms, actually, I guess they're technically a white or a brown food. They are very good for you. Some people say, that shiitake, maitake, or Asian mushrooms are better for you. I generally think if it's a plant and you can eat it and it's legal, it's probably going to be good for you. I don't think there's any magical benefits. I don't necessarily recommend like drying them and grinding them into powders and taking capsule form or sprinkling it on your food. I think you should put them in your food. I buy the Asian mushrooms dried at Costco when they sell them, and I just rehydrate them and cook them in my food. So they're good for you. They're not magical. There's no magical food. And I saw something else. Do you decrease the carb portion of the plate when eating legumes? Wow, that's a good question. Oh, hey, Cheryl. So if you're managing blood sugar issues, then I would say yes. If you generally don't have problems with blood sugar management, and by that I just mean, do you have prediabetes or do you have diabetes? If you don't, like, your doctor's never told you there's any trouble with your blood sugars, then I don't. I just say, you can if you want to. So if you want to use black beans as your carb, you can, but I'm not usually that picky on that. I would let you have brown rice and black beans on your plate with your non-starchy vegetables and your fruit. What about supplements that are fine and beneficial? Let's see. So supplement generally in pill form. If you're low, let's say your iron is low or your vitamin D is low, or potassium is low, then you need to take a supplement. If your labs have been checked and they're fine, I wouldn't recommend it. Some people will say you can take between 1 and 2,000 IU of vitamin D. That could be fine. That's a conversation to have with your doctor. The other supplements that maybe would be fine to just kind of toss on there would generally just be a multivitamin. And I would get like a common name brand, a store brand or something like that. Most other supplements I wouldn't really bother with or recommend. Now, if you want to try something and see how you feel when you're taking it, you need to have some way that you're monitoring whether it's useful. And then if you're taking a supplement for low lab, like your iron's low or whatever, you should be checking every 3 months to see if it's working. And once your levels are back up, you're having a conversation about whether you can just keep it, stable without the pills. Is there any specific food can stimulate your appetite? So during treatment, that can be pretty hard. I think generally foods that you like can stimulate your appetite. Foods themselves, not so much, but how you set your table and what foods are prepared for you can decrease or increase your appetite. So if you're nauseated, hot foods and the smells of foods aren't particularly helpful. But if you use like placemats or colors at your table that are red or yellow, they're more appetite stimulating. And then of course there's medications that can help stimulate your appetite, which would, most of them are prescription is what I would recommend. And so then you can ask your doctor about that. And they might be just, good for making sure you get enough calories to tolerate and stick with your treatments. And then you don't need them after treatment's over. Are natural sugars like maple syrup, agave, coconut, okay instead of white sugar? So they're not any better than white sugar. To me, it matters how much you're using of it. Like I keep white sugar, I keep brown sugar, I keep maple syrup. And it just depends on what I'm making, what type of sugar that I use. I don't have any problem with white sugar as long as you're not using too much of it. I also don't have a definition for what's too much. I generally ask people, well, like what makes sense to you and how much do you need to add to make it taste the way you want it to? But if you want more information on sugar, I've got lots of articles on that. And I also did a whole webinar on carbohydrates that's over on my webinars page, and I touch on sugar. Can we cook with olive oil or not? Recommended. Olive oil is great. It's good for you. It has a low smoke point. So when people talk about don't cook with olive oil, that's mostly what it's about. because it changes the chemical nature. I don't think it's necessarily bad for you to eat a lot of cooked olive oil. I think it doesn't do the cooking function that you want it to. So I usually cook with things like peanut oil or canola oil or just vegetable oil. And then those oils have higher smoke points. And then I use olive oil for like marinades or salad dressings or things like that. Is stevia sweetener okay? It's fine. Again, I would ask how much are you using and what are you using it for? Because I think that if you use a lot of sweetened, if you eat a lot of sweetened things, or you find that you can't drink water because you just always want a sweet taste in your mouth, that can make a change in your taste buds that makes it hard to enjoy nutritious, healthy foods. But if you just add stevia here and there, I think it's fine. I grow stevia leaves in my yard and I brew the leaves with my mint leaves to make a little tea. If you add a little sugar to black tea, does it cancel the tea's benefit? No. I usually drink my tea black, but I do add sugar to coffee because, man, that stuff is bitter and strong. I think a little bit is perfectly fine, like reasonable, a teaspoon or whatever. The amount of sugar that's added to most sweet teas is maybe a little above what, it counts as a sugar sweetened beverages. But if you're just putting a little sugar, a little honey, like in your tea, hot tea or whatever, I don't have a problem with that. What about herbs that we can add to our food that are beneficial? So mostly I talk about culinary herbs. So it's not anything about like tinctures or brewing herbs together and drinking the water. All types of plants basically are, I guess herbs and spices are two different things. Some of them are like leaves and then some of them are roots. And I did a whole webinar on that a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, that is on my website. So if you want more specific information about that. Otherwise, if you're talking about like herbal remedies or anything like that, I can't really speak to that. But I always say, if you get like the Mrs. Dash spice mixes or like the Italian seasoning spice mix, anytime that you add those herbs to your food, turmeric, a lot of people talk about turmeric. You don't need to take pills of turmeric. You can just like sprinkle it on your eggs or make a turmeric latte or, ways that you can use those. Cinnamon is a great thing to add to all kinds of foods that you're eating. Like we're going to do a sweet potato recipe where cinnamon is one of the optional toppings, or you can put it in your oatmeal or in your chia. That's what I like to have with my breakfast. All right, so I will send out, probably not tonight, but tomorrow, I'll send out a web page that has the recording of this webinar and also has slides that you can download and these links for all your different things. I will ask if you can please fill out the evaluation, which I'll send in the email as well. But let me just put it in the chat here. If you can fill out an evaluation for the webinar, and that way we know how we can make changes if we need to for the next one. Oh, let me make sure to send it to everybody. There you go. So yeah, thanks for being on with me tonight. You can always email me with other questions, and I hope you join me for another program again soon. Thanks so much.